Hey, imagine that. I remembered to unmute. Oh, wait. Julie Andrews was married to Blake Edwards? Damn, I didn't know that. That's kind of cool. Anyway, that's one less mystery. Okay, it is Thursday. And that means we are going back into The Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. Welcome in, Guilty. Okay, breakdancing. Nice. And how are you doing this evening? I need to put another webcam on my throne list to replace my CAD cam, since neither one of the webcams I have want to work properly for it. And I'm not going to put my Razor one over there, because then I wouldn't have anything to show my wonderful face with. Okay, Fosabot's still doing its usual thing. So get it shouted out twice. I forgot to change the setting on it. We need detective today. Okay. One fish, two fish, dragon age, new fish? What the hell? Oh well. So you feeling any better after you finished streaming earlier? Naps are good. I'm trying to cut back on mine since my weird 12-hour night, and haven't been able to sleep right since then. Oh yeah, and since you're here and it looks like the only one here, I might be getting another model soon. I guess two, technically. So I will have a different model for when I'm gaming. Ugh. Doctor's appointments. Because the person who made this model messaged me a couple of days ago and said, you know, I thought you might need a model update. So they made another model. And the person wanting to learn how to do rigging is doing some really cool rigging on it, so I just hope my computer can handle it. Yeah, it's really cool of them. I said it's like the models I get so far have been training exercises. And then I won the chibi model from Dusk. And I won another model from the Moxie's Corner people, and I haven't heard anything from that for a few months. But that was like a year ago, so I kind of not too worried about that one. And I'm perfectly good with this model too. But it is incredibly nice of them to get the other model working. But it will definitely be more wizardy. And a little bit more pharaoh looking, which is still cool. But anyway, if you're up for it, are you ready to hear at least 2 stories tonight? Because there's 2 more in the Chains of Crime series. And if all goes well, Friday Night Fairy Tales is happening tomorrow night. Because the tabletop I'm involved in is switched to Saturday now. So it'll be cool. Oh, what the hell? I need to fix that timer. Cal, I don't need that message up anymore. Okay. That's for my unattended streams. But unless you're having to get ready for work, feel free to just sit back, get comfy, and we'll get into a couple more mysteries. In the Chains of Crime by E.W.Hornung. Story 5. The Return Match. I had turned into Piccadilly one thick evening in the following November, when my guilty heart stood still at the sudden grip of a hand upon my arm. I thought, I was always thinking, that then my inevitable hour was come at last. It was only Raffles, however, who stood smiling at me through the fog. "Well met," he said. "I've been looking for you at the club." "I was just on my way there," I returned, with an attempt to hide my tremors. It was an ineffectual attempt, as I saw from his broader smile and the little discrepitory shake of his head. "Come up to my place instead," he said. "I've got something amusing to tell you." I made excuses, for his tone foretold the kind of amusement, and it was a kind against which I had successfully set my face for months. I have stated before, however, and I can but reiterate, that to me, at all events, there was never anybody in the world so irresistible as Raffles when his mind was made up. That we had both been independent of crime since our little service to Sir Bernard Debenham, that there had been no occasion for that masterful mind to be made up in such direction for many a day, was the undeniable basis for a longer spell of honesty than I had hitherto enjoyed during the term of our mutual intimacy. Be sure I would deny it if I could. The very thing I am to tell you would discredit such a boast. I made my excuses, as I have said, but his arm slid through mine and his little laugh of light-hearted mastery. And even while I argued, we were on his staircase in the Albany. His fire had fallen low. He poked and replenished it after lighting the gas. As for me, I stood by sullenly in my overcoat until he dragged it off of my back. "What a chap you are," said Raffles playfully. "One would really think I'd possessed to crack another rib this blessed night. Well, it isn't that, Bunny, so get into the chair and take one of these Sullivans and sit tight." He held the match to my cigarette and brought me a whiskey and soda. Then he went into the lobby, and just as I was beginning to feel happy, I heard a bolt shot home. It cost me an effort to remain in my chair. Next moment he was straddling another and gloating over my discomfiture across his folded arms. "You remember Milchester, Bunny, my boy?" His tone was as bland as mine was grim, and I answered that I did. "We had a little match there that wasn't down on the card. Gentlemen and players, if you recollect." "I don't forget it." "Seeing that you never got any innings, so to speak, I thought you might. Well, the gentlemen romping in winners, and the players were presently to quad. Poor beggars. Don't be too sure. You remember that the fellow we saw in the inn? The florid, overdressed chap who, I told you, was one of the cleverest thieves in town?" "I remember him. Crochet, his name turned out to be." "Well, it was certainly the name he was convicted under, so Crochet let it be. You needn't waste any pity on him, old chap, after he escaped from the Dartmoor yesterday afternoon." "Well done." Raffles smiled, but his eyebrows had gone up and his shoulders had followed suit. "You are perfectly right. It was very well done indeed. I wonder you didn't see it in the paper. In a dense fog in the moor yesterday, old Crochet made a bolt for it and got away without a scratch under the heavy fire. All honor to him. I agree. A fellow with that much grit deserves his liberty. But Crochet has a good deal more. They hunted him all night long, couldn't find him for nuts, and that was all you missed in the morning papers." He unfolded a Pall Mall, which he had brought in with him. "But listen to this. Here's an account of the escape, with just the addition which puts the whole thing on a higher level. The fugitive has been traced to Tance, where he appears to have committed a particularly daring outrage in the early hours of his morning. He is reported to have entered the lodgings of a Reverend A.H. Ellingsworth, curate of the parish, who missed his clothes on rising in the usual hour. Later in the morning, those of the convict were discovered neatly folded at the bottom of a drawer. Meanwhile, Crochet had made good his second escape, though it is believed that so distinctive a disguise will lead to his recapture during the day." "What do you think of that, Bunny?" "He is certainly a sportsman," said I, reaching for the paper. "There's more," said Raffles. "He's an artist, and I envy him. The curate of all men. Beautiful, beautiful! But that's not all. I saw just now that on the board of the club that there's been an outrage on the Lion of Dawlish. Parson found insensible in a 6-feet way. Our friend again. The telegram doesn't say so, but it's obvious. He simply knocked out some other fellow, changed clothes again, and come gaily to town. Isn't it great? I do believe that it's the best thing of the kind that's ever been done." "But why should he come to town?" In an instant, enthusiasm faded from Raffles' face. Clearly, I had reminded him of some prime anxiety, forgotten in his impersonal joy over the exploit of a fellow criminal. He looked over his shoulder towards the lobby before replying. "I believe," he said, "that the beggar's on my tracks." As he spoke, he was himself again, quietly amused, cynically unperturbed, and characteristically enjoying the situation of my surprise. "But look here, what do you mean?" said I. What does Crochet know about you? Not much, but he suspects. Why should he? Because, in his way, he's very nearly as good a man as I am. Besides, my dear bud, with eyes in his head and brains behind him, he couldn't help suspecting. He saw me once in town at the Old Baird. He must have seen me that day in the pub on the way to Milchester, as well as afterwards on the cricket field. As a matter of fact, I know he did, for he wrote and told me so before his trial. He wrote you? And you never told me? The old shrug answered the old grievance. What was that good? What good was that, dear my fellow? It would only have worried you. Well, what did he say? That he was sorry that he had been running before getting back to town, and he had proposed doing himself the honor of paying me a call. However, he trusted it was not only preferred pleasure deferred, but he begged me not to go and get lagged myself before he came out. Of course, he knew the Melrose necklace was gone, though he hadn't got it, and he said that the man who could take that and leave the rest was a man after his own heart. And so on, with certain little proposals of the far future, which I fear he may be very near future indeed. I'm only surprised he hasn't turned up yet. He looked again towards the lobby, which he had left in darkness, with the inner door shut as carefully as the outer one. I asked him what he meant to do. Let him knock if he gets this far. The porter is to say I'm out of town. It will be true, too, in another hour or so. You're going off tonight? By the 7:15 from Liverpool Street. I don't say much about my people, Bunny, but I have the best sisters married into a country parson in the eastern counties. They always make me welcome and let me read the lessons for the sake of getting me to church. I'm sorry you won't be there to hear me on Sunday, Bunny. I've figured out some of the best schemes in the parish, and I know no better port in a storm. But I must pack. I thought I'd just let you know where I was going, and why, in case you cared to follow my example. He flung the stump of a cigarette into the fire, stretched himself as he rose, and remained so long in that inelegant attitude that my eyes mounted from his body to the face. A second later they had followed his access to the room, and I also was on my legs. On the threshold of the folding doors that divided bedroom and sitting room, a well-built man stood in an ill-fitting broadcloth and bowed to us with his bullet head presented an unbroken disk of short red hair. Brief was my survey as the astounded apparition. The interval was long enough for Raffles to recover his composure. His hands were in his pockets and a smile on his face. When he left, my eyes flew back to him. Let me introduce you, Bunny, he said, to our distinguished colleague, Mr. Reginald Crochet. The bullet head bobbed up, and there was a wrinkled brow above the coarse, shaven face that was crimson. I remember from the grip of the collar several sizes too small. But I noted something conscientious at the time. I jumped to my own conclusion, and I turned to Raffles with an oath. It's a trick, I cried. It's another of your cursed tricks. You got him here, and then you got me. You want me to join you, I suppose. I'll see you hanged. So cold was the stare which met my outburst that I became ashamed of my words while they were still yet upon my lips. Really, Bunny, said Raffles, and turned his shoulder with a shrug. Lord you have you, cried Crochet. He knew nothing. He didn't expect me. He's all right. You're the cool canary, you are, he went on to Raffles. I knew you were, but do me proud. You're after my own kidney. And he thrusts out a shaggy hand. Well, after that, said Raffles, taking it, what am I to say? But you must have heard my opinion of you. I am proud to make your acquaintance. How the deuce did you get at it? Well, never mind you, said Crowley, loosening his collar. Let's talk about how I'm better to get out. Lord, love there, that's the better. There was a livid ring round your bull neck that he fingered tenderly. Didn't know how much longer I'd have to play the gent, he replied. Didn't know you who I'd bring in. Whiskey and soda? Inquired Raffles, when the convict was in the chair from which I had leapt. I don't drink it neat, said Crochet. But talk business first. You don't get over me like that. Lord love you. Well then, what can I do for you? You know without telling me. Well, give it a name. Clean eels, then. That's what I want to show, and I leaves you the way you to it. We're brothers in arms, though I ain't armed this time. It ain't necessary. You're too much sense. But brothers we are, and you'll see a brother through. Let's put it to that. You'll let me see through your own way. I leave it all to you. His tone was rich in consolation and concession. He bent over and tore a pair of button boots from his bare feet, which he had stretched towards the fire, painfully uncurling his toes. I hope you take a larger size than them, he said. I've had to see a few during the time. I wasn't in long before you. And you won't tell me how you got out in. Ooh, what's the use? I can't teach you nothing. Besides, I want out. I want out of London and England and bloomin' Europe too. That's all I want of you, mister. I won't ask how you do the job. You know where I come, and 'cause I heard you say, and you were I want to lead for, 'cause I've just told you. The details I leave entirely to you. Well, said Raffles, we must see what we can do. We must, said the Crusher, leaning back comfortably, and began twirling his stubby thumbs. Raffles turned to me with a twinkle in his eye, but his forehead was scored with thought, and resolve mingled with resignation in the lines of his mouth, and he spoke exactly as though he and I were alone in the room. You seize the situation, Bunny. If our friend here is caught, to speak his language, he means to blow the gaff on you and me. It's too considerate to say so in so many words, but it's plain enough and natural enough that's the matter. I would do the same in his place. We had a bulge before. He has it now. It's perfectly fair. We must take on this job. We aren't in a position to refuse it, and even if we were, I should take it on. Our friend isn't a great sportsman, and he's got clear away from Dartmoor. It would be 1,000 pities to let him go back, nor shall he. Not if I can think of a way of getting him abroad. Any way you like, murmured Croshaw, with his eyes shut. I leave it all to you. But you'll have to wake up and tell us things. All right, mister, but I'm fair on the rocks for sleep. As he stood up, blinking. Think you were traced to town? Must have been. And here. Not in this fog, with any luck. Raffles went into the bedroom, lit the gas there, and returned next minute. So you got in by the window? That's about it. It was devilish smart of you to know which one. It beats me how when you brought it up in daylight, fog and no light. But let that pass. You don't think you were seen? I don't think it, sir. Well, let's hope that you're right. I shall reconnoiter and soon find out. As you'd better come too, Bunny, and have something to eat and talk it over. Raffles looked at me. I looked at Croshaw, anticipating trouble, and trouble brewed in his blank, fierce face, in the glitter of his startled eyes, and the sudden closing of his fists. And what's to become of me? He cried out with an oath. You wait here. No, you don't, he roared, and at a bound he had his back to the door. You don't get around me like that, you cuckoos. Raffles turned to me with a twitch of the shoulders. That's the worst of these professors, he said. They will not use their heads. They see the pegs and mean to hit them. But that's all they do and see and mean. And they think we're the same. No wonder we licked them last time. Don't talk through your neck, snarled the convict. Talk out straight, curse you. Oh, right, said Raffles. I'll talk as straight as you like. You say you can put yourself in my hands. You leave it all to me. But you don't trust me an inch. I know what's to happen if I fail. I accept the risk. I take this thing on. Yet you think I'm going straight out to give you away and make you give away in turn? You're a fool, Mr. Croshaw. Though you have broken Dartmoor, you've got to listen to a better man and obey him. I see you through in my own way, and not at all. I come and go as I like, and with whom I like, without your interference. You stay here and lie just as low as you know how. Be as wise as your word and leave the whole thing to me. If you won't, if you're fool enough to not trust me, there's the door. Go out and say what you like, and be hanged to you. Crawshay slapped his thigh. That's talking, he said. Lord love you, I know where I am when you talk like that. I'll trust you. I know a man when he gets his tongue between his teeth, and you're all right. I don't say much about this other gent, though I saw him come along with you in the time you was in the provinces. But if he's a pal of yours, Mr. Raffles, he'll be all right, too. I only hope you gents ain't too stony. And he touched his pockets with a rueful face. I only went for their togs, he said. You never struck two such a stony brook coasters in your life. Oh, that's all right, said Raffles. We'll see you through properly. Leave it to us, and you sit right. Right, said Crawshay, and I'll have a sleep time while you're gone. But no spirits, no thank you, not yet. Once let me get loose on the drink, and Lord love you, I'm a gone coon. Raffles got his overcoat, a long, light driving coat, I remember, and even as he put it on, our fugitive was dozing in the chair. We left him murmuring incoherently, with the gas out and his bare feet toasting. Not such a bad chap, that professor, said Raffles on the stairs. A real genius in his way, too, though his methods are a little elementary for my taste. But technique isn't everything. To get out of Dartmoor and into Albany in the same 24 hours is a whole that justifies its parts. Good Lord. We had passed a man in the foggy courtyard, and Raffles had nipped my arm. Who's that? The last man we want to see. I hope to heaven he didn't hear me. But who is he, Raffles? Our old friend Mackenzie from the yard. I stood still in horror. Do you think he's on Carway's track? I'll find out. And before I could remonstrate, he had wheeled me around and found my voice. He merely laughed, whispering that the bold course was not a safe one at the time. But it's madness. Not it. Shut up. Is that you, Mr. Mackenzie? The detective turned about and scrutinized us keenly, and through the gaslight mist I noticed that his hair was grizzled at the temples, and his face was cadaverous from the wound that he had nearly been his death. I don't know you, sirs, said he. I hope you're fit again, said my companion. My name is Raffles, and we met at the Milchester last year. Is that a fact? Cried the Scotsman with a quiet start. Now I remember your face, and yours too, sir. Aye, young was a bad business, but it ended very well, and that's the main thing. His native caution had returned to him. Raffles pinched my arm. Yes, it ended splendidly, but for you, he said. But what about this escape of the leader of the gang, that fellow Creshaw? What do you think of that, eh? I have none of the peculiars, replied the Scots. Good, cried Raffles. I was only afraid you might be on his tracks once more. Mackenzie shook his head with a dry smile, and wished us a good evening with an invisible window was thrown up, and a whistle blown through the fog. We must see this out, whispered Raffles. Nothing more natural than a little curiosity on our part. After him, quick! Then we followed the detective into another entrance on the same side from that which we had emerged. The left hand was one's way to Piccadilly. Quite openly we followed him, and at the foot of the stairs met one of the porters of the place. Raffles stopped him and asked what was wrong. Nothing, sir, said the fellow glibly. Rot, said Raffles. That was Mackenzie, the detective. I've just been speaking to him. What's he here for? Come on, my good fellow. We won't give you away, if you've instructions not to tell. The man looked quaintly wistful. The temptation of an audience hard upon him. The door shut upstairs, and he fell. It's like this, he whispered. This afternoon a gentleman comes after rooms, and I send him to the office. One of the clerks he goes round to and shows him the empties, and the gentleman particularly struck on the set of coppers is nipping now. So he sends the clerk to fetch the manager, as there is one or two things he wished to speak about, and when they come back, Bloated the gent wasn't gone, beg your pardon, sir, and he's clean disappeared off the face of the premises. And the porter looked at us with shining eyes. Well, said Raffles. Well, sir, they looked about, and last they gave up on him a bad job. Thought he'd changed his mind and didn't want to tip the clerk, so they shut up the place and come anyway. And that's all till about half an hour ago, when I takes the manager to extra special straw. In about 10 minutes he comes running out of the note and says to meet with Scotland Yard in a hansom. And that's all I know, sir, straight. The coppers is up there now, and the tech and the manager, and they think their gent is about the place somewhere still. Lest, I reckon that's their idea, but who he is or what they want it for, I don't know. Jolly interesting, said Raffles. I'm coming out to inquire. Come on, Bunny, there should be some fun. Beg your pardon, Mr. Raffles, but you won't say anything about me. Oh, not I. You're a good fellow. I won't forget it if it leads to sport. Sport! He whispered as we reached the landing. It looks like precious poor sport for you and me, Bunny. What are we going to do? I don't know. There's no time to think. This to start with. And he thundered on the shut door, and a policeman opened it. Raffles strode past him with the air of a chief commissioner, and I followed before the man, who recovered from his astonishment. The bare boards rang under us. In the bedroom we found a knot of officers stooping over a low ledge of the window ledge in the constable's lantern. Mackenzie was the first to stand upright and greeted us with a glare. "May I ask what you gentlemen want?" he said severely. "We want to lend a hand," said Raffles briskly. "We lent it once before, and it was my friend here who took over from you the fellow who split with the rest and held him tight. Surely that entitles him, at all events, to at least see any fun that's going on. As for myself, well, it's true I only helped to carry you out of the house, but for an old acquaintance' sake I do hope, my dear Mackenzie, that you will permit us to share such sport as there may be. I myself can only stop for a few minutes in any case." "Then you don't see much," growled the constable, "for he's not up here. Constable, go you and stand at the foot of the stairs, and let no other body up on any consideration. These gentlemen may be able to help us, after all." "That's kind of you, Mackenzie," cried Raffles warmly. "But what is it all? I questioned one of the porters, but could get nothing out of him except that somebody had been in these rooms and not since had been seen." "He's a man I want," said Mackenzie. "He's concealed himself somewhere about the premises, or I'm very much mistaken. Do you reside in Albany, Mr. Raffles?" "I do." "Will your rooms be near these?" "On the next staircase but one." "Have you just left them?" "Oh, just." "Been in all the afternoon, perhaps?" "Oh, no." "Then I may have to search your rooms. I'm prepared to search every room in Albany. Our man seems to have gone for our leads, but unless he's left more marks outside than in, or we find him up there, I shall have the entire building to ransack." "I will leave you my key," said Raffles at once. "I'm dining out, but I'll leave it with the officer down below." I caught my breath in a mute amazement. What was the meaning of this insane promise? It was wistful, gratuitous, suicidal. It made me pluck on sleeve of open horror and disgust. But with a word of thanks, Mackenzie had returned to the windowsill, and we sauntered unwatched through the folding doors into the adjoining room. Here was a window looked down to the courtyard. It was still open, and as we gazed out the apparent idleness, Raffles reassured me. "It's all right, Bunny. You do what I tell you, and leave the rest to me. It's a tight corner, but I don't despair. What you've got to do is to stick to these chaps, especially if they search my rooms. They mustn't poke about more than necessary, and they won't if you're there." "But where will you be? You're never going to leave me in the land alone." "If I do, it will be to turn up trumps at the right moment. Besides, there are such things as windows, and Crashaw's a man to take in his risks. But you must trust me, buddy. You've known me long enough." "And you're going now?" "Now there's no time to lose. Stick to them, old chap, and don't let them suspect you, whatever else you do." He lay a hand on my shoulder. Then he left me at the window and recrossed the room. "I've got to go now," I heard him say. But my friend will stay and see this through, and I'll leave my key on the rooms downstairs with the constable. Good luck, Mackenzie. I only wish I could stay. Good night, sir, came the preoccupied voice, and many thanks. Mackenzie was still busy at his window, and I remained at mine, a prey to mingled fear and wrath for all my knowledge of Raffles and his infinite resource. But this time I felt that I knew more or less what he would do in any given emergency. At least I could conjecture a characteristic course of equal cunning and audacity. He would return to his rooms, put Crawshay on his guard, and stow him away. Now, there were such things as windows. Then why was Raffles going to desert us all? I thought of many things, lastly of a cab. These bedroom windows looked to a narrow side street. They were not very high. From them a man might drop on the roof of a cab, even as it passed, and be given away, even under the noses of the police. I pictured Raffles driving that cab, unrecognizably in the foggy night, and a vision came to me as he passed under the window, tucking up the collar of his great driving coat on the way to his rooms. It was still with me when he passed again on his way back and stopped to hand the constable his key. "We're on his track," said a voice behind me. "He's got up the leads, sure enough, though he's managed from yon window a muster to me. We're going to lock up here and try from the attics. You'd better come with us if you don't mind." The top floor of the Albany and elsewhere is devoted to the servants, congeries, and little kitchens and cubicles, many used by lumber rooms, but Raffles was among the many. The annex in this case was, of course, empty, as were the rooms below, and that was lucky, for we now filled it, that with a manager who now joined us, and another tenant whom he brought with him, to Mackenzie's undisguised annoyance. "Better let in Piccadilly at a crown a head," he said. "Here, my man, out you go on the roof and make one less, and I have a truncheon road." We crowded to the little window, which Mackenzie took care to fill, and a moment yielded no sound but the crunch and slither of constabulary boots on sooty slates. Then came a shout. "What is it?" cried Mackenzie. "A rope," we heard, "hanging from the spout by a hook." "Sirs," cried Mackenzie, "that's how he got up from below. He would just sling it until he caught it, and never touched it. How long a rope, my lad?" "Quite short. I've got it." "Did it hang over a window?" "Ask him that," cried the manager. "He can see if by leaning by the parapet." The question was repeated by Mackenzie. A pause, and then, "Yes, it did." "Ask him how many windows are long," shouted the manager in high excitement. "6, he says," said Mackenzie next minute as he drew in his head and shoulders. "I should like to see those rooms, 6 windows along." "Mr. Raffles," announced the manager after a mental calculation. "Is that a fact?" cried Mackenzie. "Then we shall have no difficulty at all. He's left me his key down below." The words had a dry, speculative intonation, which even then I found time to dislike. It was as though the coincidence had already struck the Scotsman as something more. "Where is Mr. Raffles?" asked the manager, as we all filed downstairs. "He's gone out to his dinner," said Mackenzie. "Are you sure?" "I saw him go," I said. My heart was beating horribly. I would not trust myself to speak again, but I wound my way to a front place in the little procession, and was, in fact, the second man to cross the threshold that had been the Rubicon of my life. As I did so, I uttered a cry of pain, for Mackenzie had trod back heavily on my toes. In another second I saw the reason, and saw it was another cry. A man was lying at full length before the fire on his back, with a little wound and a white forehead, and the blood running into his eyes. And the man was Raffles himself. "Suicide?" he said. "No, there's the poker. It looks more like murder." He went on his knees and shook his head quite cheerfully. "It ain't even murder," he said with a shade of disgust in a matter-of-fact voice. He is no more than a flesh wound, and I have my doubts whether it felled him, but sirs, he just stinks of chloroform. He got up and fixed his keen gray eyes upon me. My own were filled with tears, but they faced him unashamed. I understood you to say that you saw him go out, he said sternly. I saw that long driving coat, of course. I thought he was inside it. And I could have sworn it was the same gent when he gave me the key. It was the disconsolate voice of the constable in the background. On him turned Mackenzie, white to the lips. You'd think anything, some of you policemen, he said. What's your number, you rotter? P-34? You'll be hearing more from this, Mr. P-34. If that gentleman was dead, instead of coming to himself while he was talking, do you know what it would be? Guilty of his manslaughter. You stuck pig in buttons. Do you know who you've let slip, Butterfingers? Crochet, no less. Him that broke Dartmoor yesterday. By God, that made you P-34. If you lose him, I'll hound you from the force. Working face, shaking fists, and calm ran fire. It was a new side of Mackenzie, and one to remember. Next moment, he was dashed from our midst. Difficult thing to break your own head, said Raffles later. Infinite easier to cut your own throat. Chloroform's another matter. When you've used it on others, you know how to dose it nicely. So you thought I was really gone. Poor old bunny. But I hope Mackenzie saw your face. He did, said I. I would not tell him how Mackenzie had seen, however. That's all right. I wouldn't have had you miss it for the whole world. But you mustn't think me a brute, old boy. For I fear that man, and, you know, we sink or swim together. And now we sink or swim with Crossley, too, I said dolefully. Oh, not we, said Raffles with conviction. Old Crochet's a true sportsman, and he'll do us by what we've done him. Besides, this makes us quits, and I don't think, Bunny, that we'll take on professors again. That was a good one. And since that took a little over half an hour, I will probably go ahead and do an ad break. And I've got to stretch because, honestly, my butt's hurting right now. So I will see you all in a few. I know, there's a severe lack of cat in the cat cam. Not sure where they are. Oh well. Welcome back. I hope you all got a drink and took care of anything that you needed to. But let's get into the next story. If I don't destroy my desk in the process. I don't think I've ever said the entire title of this thing, as it's In the Chains of Crime. But as they like to do long titles and explanations, it's Being the Confessions of a Late Prisoner of the Crown and sometimes accomplice of the more notorious A.J. Raffles, cricketer and criminal, whose fate is unknown. By E.W.Hornung. Story 6. The Gift of the Emperor. When the king of the Cannibal Islands made faces at Queen Victoria and his European counterpart said the cable was tinging with the compliments on the exploit, the indignation of England was not less than the surprise, for the thing was not so common as it has since become. But when it transpired that a gift of peculiar significance was to follow the congratulations, to give them the weight, the inference prevailed that the white potentate and the black was taken simultaneous leave of their 14 senses. Yeah, I'm going to start that over because that's just horrible. When the king of the Cannibal Islands made faces at Queen Victoria and his European counterpart set the cables tinging with his compliments on the exploit, the indignation in England was not less than the surprise, for the thing was not so common as it has since become. But when it transpired that a gift of peculiar significance was to follow the congratulations, to give them weight, the inference prevailed that the white potentate and the black had taken simultaneous leave of their 14 senses. For the gift was a pearl of price unparalleled, picked aforetime by British cutlasses from the Polynesian setting, and presented by British royalty to the monarch who seized this opportunity of restoring it to its original possessor. The incident would have been a godsend to the press a few weeks later. Even in June, there were letters, and large headlines, leaded type, the Daily Chronicle devoting half of its literary page to a charming drawing of the island capital, which the new Pall Mall, in a leading article, headed by pun, advised the government to blow to flinders. I was myself driving a poor but honest pen at the time, and the topic of the hour goaded me to satiric verse which obtained a better place than anything I had yet turned out. I had let my flat in town and taken inexpensive quarters in Thames Ditton, on the plea of a disintegrating passion for the river. "First rate, old boy," said Raffles, who must needs come to see me, lying in the boat while I sculled and steered. "I suppose they pay you pretty well for these, eh?" "Not a penny." "Nonsense, Bunny. I thought they paid you so well. Give them time and they'll give you your check." No, I shan't, I said gloomily. I've not to be content with the honor of getting in. The editor wrote to say no in so many words. I added, but I gave the gentleman a distinguished name. You don't mean to say you've written for payment already? No, it was the last thing I had intended to admit, but I had done it. The murder was out, and there was no sense in further concealment. I had written for my money because I really needed it. If you must know, I was cursedly hard up. Raffles nodded as though he knew already, and I warmed my woes. It was no easy matter to keep your end in the raw freelance of letters. For my part, I was afraid I wrote neither well enough nor ill enough for success. I suffered from a persistent, ineffectual feeling of style. Oh. Verse I could manage, but it did not pay. To personal photographs and the baser journalism I could not, and I would not, stoop. Raffles nodded again, this time with a smile that stayed in his eyes as he leant back watching me. I knew that he was thinking of other things I had stopped to, and I thought I knew what he was going to say. He had said it before so often. He was sure to say it again. I had my answer ready, but evidently he was tired of asking the same question. His lids fell, and he took up the paper which he had dropped, and I scullied the length of the old red wall of Hampton Court before he spoke again. And they gave you nothing for these. My dear Bunny, they're capital, not only quid plauses, but for crystallizing your subject and putting it in a nutshell. Certainly you've taught me more than it's you before. But is it really worth £50,000, a single pearl? 100, I believe, but that wouldn't scan. £100,000, said Raffles with his eyes shut. And again I made certain that I was coming, but again I was mistaken. If it's worth all that, he cried at last, there would be no getting rid of it at all. It's not like a diamond that can be subdivided. But I beg your pardon, Bunny, I was forgetting. And we said no more about the Emperor's gift, for pride thrives on an empty pocket, and no privation would have drawn me from the proposal which I had expected Raffles to make. My expectation had been half a hope, though I only knew it now, and neither did we touch on it again when what Raffles professed to have forgotten my apostasy and my lapse into virtue, and he had been pleased to call it. We were both a little silent, a little constrained, and each preoccupied with his own thoughts. It was months since we had met, and as I saw him off towards 11 o'clock that Sunday night, I fancied it was for more months that we were saying goodbye. But as we waited for the train, I remarked those clear eyes peering at me under the station lamps, and when I met their glance, Raffles shook his head. You don't look well on it, Bunny, said he. I never did believe in the Thames Valley. You want to change the air. I wished I might get in. What you really want is a sea voyage. And a winter at St. Moritz, or do you recommend Cannes or Cairo? It's all very well, old chap, but you forget what I told you about my funds. I forget nothing. I merely don't want to hurt your feelings. But look here, a sea voyage you shall have. I want one myself, and you shall come with me as my guest. We'll spend July in the Mediterranean. But you're playing cricket. Oh, hang the cricket. Well, I thought if you meant... Of course I mean it. Will you come? Like a shot, if you go. And I shook his hand and waved mine farewell, with a perfectly good-humored conviction that I should hear no more of the matter. It was a passing thought, no more, no less. I soon wished it were more. That week found me wishing myself out of England for good and all. I was making nothing. I could but subsist on the difference between the rent I had paid for my flat and the rent at which I had to sublet it, furnished for the season. And the season was near its end, and the creditors awaited me in town. Was it possible to be entirely honest? I had run no bills when I had money in my pockets, and the mere downright honesty seemed to do me less ignoble. But from Raffles, of course, I heard nothing more. A week went by, and half another week, and then late on the second Wednesday night I found a telegram from him at my lodgings, after seeking him vainly in town and dining with desperation at the solitary club to which I still belonged. Arranged to leave Waterloo by North German Lloyd Special, he wired. 9:25 a.m., Monday next. We'll meet you in Southampton, aboard the Ulhan, with tickets and writing. He did, a light-hearted letter enough, but full of serious solitude for me and my health and prospects. A letter that touched me the more in the light of our past relations and the twilight of their complete rupture. He said that he had booked 2 berths to Naples, that we were bound for Capri, which had clearly the island of lotus eaters, that we could bask there together, and for a while forget. It was a charming letter. I had never seen Italy, and the privilege of initiation should be his. No mistake was greater than to deem it an impossible country for the summer. The Bay of Naples was never so divine, and he wrote of fairy lands forlorn, as though the poetry sprang unbidden to his pen. To come back to earth in prose, I might think it unpatriotic of him to choose a German boat, but on no other line did you receive much attention and accommodation for your money. There was a hint of better reasons, Raffles wrote, as he had telegraphed from Bremen, and I rather that the personal use of some little influence with the authorities there had resulted in a material reduction of our affairs. Imagine my excitement and delight. I managed to pay what I owed to the Thames Denton and squeeze a small editor for a very small cheque, and my tailors for 1 more flannel suit. I remember that I broke my last sovereign to get a box of Sullivan cigarettes for Raffles to smoke on the voyage, but my heart was as light as my purse on the Monday morning, and the fairest morning of an unfair summer, when the special whirled me through the sunshine to the sea. A tender awaited us at Southampton. Raffles was not on board, nor did I really look for him till we reached the lighter's side. And then I looked in vain. His face was not among the many that fringed the rail. His hand was not of the few that waved to friends. I climbed aboard in a sudden heaviness. I had no ticket, nor the money to pay for one. I did not even know the number of my room. My heart was in my mouth as I waylaid a steward and asked if a Mr. Raffles was on board. Thank heavens he was. But where? The man did not know, and was plainly on some other errand and a hunting I had to go. But there was no sign of him on the promenade deck, and none below in the saloon. The smoking room was empty, but for a little German with a red mustache twisted into his eyes. Nor was a fellow in his own cabin, whither I inquired my way in desperation, and where the sight of his own name on the baggage was certainly a further reassurance. Why he himself kept in the background, however, I could not conceive, and only sinister reasons would suggest themselves in explanation. So there you are. I've been looking all over the ship. Despite the graven prohibition, I had tried the bridge at the last resort, and there indeed was A.J. Raffles, seated on a skylight, and leaning over one of the officers' long chairs, in which reclined a girl in a white drill coat and skirt, a slim girl with a pale skin, dark hair, and rather remarkable eyes. So much I noted as he rose and quickly turned. Thereupon I could think of nothing but the swift grimace which preceded a start of a well-feigned astonishment. "Why, Bunny!" cried Raffles. "Is it really you?" I stammered something as he pinched my hand. "Are you coming in this ship? And to Naples, too? Well, upon my word, Miss Warner, may I introduce you?" And he did so without a blush, describing me as an old schoolfellow whom he had not seen for months, with woeful circumstance and gratuitous detail that filled me at once with confusion, suspicion, and revolt. I felt myself blushing for us both, and I did not care. My address utterly deserted me, and I made no effort to recover it, to carry the thing off. All I would do was to mumble such words as Raffles actually put into my mouth, and that I was doubtful and a thoroughly evil grace. So you saw my name on the passengers and came and searched me. Good old Bunny. I say, though, I wish you'd share my cabin. I've got a beauty on the promenade deck, and they wouldn't promise to keep me by myself. I ought to see about it before they shove me in some alien. In any case, we shall have to get out of this. For a quartermaster had entered the wheelhouse, and even while he had been speaking, the pilot had taken possession of the bridge as we ascended. The tender left us with flying handkerchiefs and shrill goodbyes, and as we bowed to Miss Warner on the promenade deck, there came a deep, slow throbbing under my foot, and our voyage had begun. It did not begin pleasantly between Raffles and me. On the deck we had overborne my stubborn perplexity by dint of a forced, though gleefully, joviality. In his cabin, the gloves were off. "You idiot," he said. "You've given me away again." "How have I given you away?" I ignored the fresh insult from his last word. "How? I should have thought my clock could see that I meant us a chance to meet." "After taking both tickets yourself?" "They know nothing about that on board. Besides, I haven't decided when I took the tickets." "Then you should have let me know when you did decide. You lay your plans and never say a word, and expected me to be tumbled into them by the light of nature. How was I to know you had nothing on?" I turned the tables on some effect. Raffles almost hung his head. "The fact is, Bunny, I didn't mean you to know. You've grown such a pious rabbit in your old age." My nickname and his tone went far to mollify me. Other things went farther, but I had much to forgive him. "If you were afraid of writing," I pursued, "it was your business to give me the tip the moment I set foot on board. I would have taken it all right. I'm not so virtuous as all that." Was it my imagination, or did Raffles look slightly ashamed? If so, it was for the first time, and the last time in all the years I knew him. Nor can I swear to it even now. "That," said he, "was the very thing I meant to do, to lie in wait in my room and get you as you passed, but you were better engaged. Don't say otherwise." "The charming Miss Warner." "Oh, she is quite charming." "Most Australian girls are," I said dryly. "How did you know she was one?" he cried. "I heard her speak." "Brute," said Raffles laughingly. "She has no more twang than you have. Her people are German. She has been in school in Dresden, and is on her way out alone." "Money?" I inquired. "Confound you," he said, and though he was laughing, I thought it was a point at which the subject might be changed. "Well," I said, "it wasn't for Miss Warner you wanted to split passengers, was it? You have some deeper game than that, eh?" "I suppose I have." "Then hadn't you better tell me what it is?" Raffles treated me to an old cautious scrutiny that I knew so well. The very familiarity of it, after all these months, set me smiling in a way that might have reassured him, for dimly already I had divined his enterprise. "I won't send you off the pilot's boat, Bunny." "Not quite." "Then remember the pearl you wrote." I did not wait for him to finish the sentence. "You've got it," I cried, my face on fire, for I caught sight of it that moment in the stateroom mirror. Raffles seemed taken aback. "Not yet," he said, "but I mean to have it when we get to Naples." "Is it on board?" "Oh, yes." "But how? Where? Who's got it?" "A little German officer, the whippersnapper with the perpendicular mustaches." "I saw him in the smoke-room." "That's the chap. He's always there. Herr Captain Wilhelm von Human, if you look it on the list. Well, he's a special envoy of the Emperor, and he's taking the pearl out with him." "You found this out in Bremen?" "No, in Berlin, from a newspaper man I know that. I'm ashamed to tell you, Bunny, that I went there on purpose." I burst out laughing. You needn't be ashamed. You are doing the very thing I was rather hoping you were going to propose the other day on the river. You were hoping it, said Raffles, with his eyes wide open. Indeed, it was his turn to show surprise, and mine to be much more ashamed than I felt. Oh, yes, I answered. I was quite keen on the idea, but I wasn't going to propose it. Yet you would have listened to me the other day. Certainly I would, but I told him without reserve, not brazenly, you understand, not even now with all the gusto of a man who likes such an adventure for its own sake, but doggedly, defiantly, through my teeth, as one who had tried to live honestly and failed. And while I was about it, I told him much more. Eloquently enough, I dare say, I gave him the chapter and verse for my hopeless struggle and inevitable defeat. For the record, for hopeless and inevitable they were to a man with my record, even though that record was written only in one's own soul. It was the old story of the thief trying to turn an honest man. The thing was against nature, and there was an end of it. Raffles entirely disagreed with me. He shook his head over my conventional view. Human nature was a board of checkers. Why not submit oneself to the alternate black and white? Why desire to be all that one thing or all that other, like our forefathers on the stage or the old-fashioned fiction? For his part, he enjoyed himself on all squares of the board, and liked the light better than the shade. My conclusion he considered absurd. But you err in good company, Bunny, for all the chap moralists preach the same twaddle. Old Virgil was the first and worst offender of you all. I back myself to climb out of the Avernus any day I like, and sooner or later I shall climb out for good. I suppose I can't very well turn myself into the limited liability company, but I could retire and settle down and live blamelessly ever after. I'm not sure that it couldn't be done on this pearl alone. Then you don't still think it too remarkable to sell? Well, we might take a fishery and haul it up with smaller fry. It would come after months of ill luck, just as we were going to sell it to schooner, by Jove. It would be the top of the Pacific. Well, we've got to get it first. Is this Von Human formidable, Cuss? More so than he looks, and he has the check of the devil. As he spoke, the white drill skirt fluttered past the open stateroom door, and I caught a glimpse of the upturned mustache beyond. But is the chap we have to deal with? Won't the pearl be in the pursuer's keeping? Raffles stood at the door, frowning out in the soylent, but for an instant he turned to me with a sniff. My good fellow, do you suppose the whole ship's company knows there's a gem like that on board? You said that it was worth £100,000. In Berlin they say it's priceless. I doubt if the skipper himself knows that Von Heumann has it on him. And has he? Must have. Then we only have him to deal with. He answered me without a word. Something white was fluttering past once more, and Raffles, stepping forth, made the promenade for 3. Part 2. I do not ask to set foot aboard the finer steamship than the Olhan and the Norse Industrial Lloyd, to meet a kindlier gentleman than her commander, or better fellows than his officer. This much at least let me have the grace to admit. I hated the voyage. It was no fault of anybody connected with the ship. It was the fault of the weather, which was monotonously ideal. Not even in my own heart did the reason reside. Conscience and I were divorced at last, the decree made absolute. With my scruples had fled all fear, and I was ready to revel between bright skies and sparkling sea with the light-hearted detachment of Raffles himself. It was Raffles himself who prevented me, but not Raffles alone. It was Raffles and that colonial minx on her way home from school. What he could see in her, but that begs the question. Of course, he saw no more than I did, but to annoy me, or perhaps to punish me for my long defection, he must turn his back on me and devote himself to the shit of the Southampton to the Mediterranean. They were always together. It was too absurd. After breakfast they would begin, and go on until 11 or 12 at night. There was no intervening hour at which you might not hear her nasal laugh or his quiet voice talking soft nonsense into her ear. Of course it was nonsense. Is it conceivable that a man like Raffles, with his knowledge of the world and his experience in women, a side of this chapter upon which I have purposefully never touched, for it deserves another volume entirely, it is incredible, I ask, that such a man can find anything but nonsense to talk by the day to a giddy young schoolgirl? That would not be unfair to the world. I think I have admitted that the young person had points. Her eyes, I suppose, were really fine, and certainly the shape of the little brown face was charming, so far as the contour can charm. I admit also the moral audacity that I cared about, and inevitable health, mettle, and vitality. I may not have occasion to report any of this young lady's speeches, though I could barely hear it, and am, therefore, the more anxious to describe her without injustice. I confess to some little prejudice against her. I resented her success with Raffles, of whom in consequence, I saw less and less each day. It is a mean thing to have to confess, and there must have been something very like jealousy rankling within me. Jealousy there was in another quarter, crude, rampant, and undignified jealousy. Captain von Human would twirl his mustache into twin spires, shoot his white cuffs over his rings, and stare at me insolently through his rimless eyeglasses. We ought to have consoled each other, but we never exchanged a syllable. The captain had a murderous scar across one of his cheeks, a present from Heidelberg, and I used to think how he must long to have Raffles there to be served the same. It was not as though von Human never had his innings. Raffles let him go on several times a day with a malicious pleasure bowling him out as he was getting set. Those were his words when I taxed him disingenuously with obnoxious conduct towards a German on a German boat. You'll make yourself disliked on board. By von Human merely. But is it wise when the man's we've got to diddle? The wisest thing I ever did. To have chummed up with him would have been fatal, a common dodge. I was consoled, encouraged, and almost reconciled. I had feared Raffles was neglecting things, and I told him and so in a burst. Here we were in Gibraltar, and not a word since Solent. He shook his head with a smile. Plenty of time, Bunny, plenty of time. We can do nothing before we get to Genoa, and that won't still be till Sunday night. The voyage is still young, and so are we. Let's make the most of things while we can. It was after dinner on the promenade deck, and as Raffles spoke, he glanced sharply fore and aft, leaving me next moment with a step full of purpose. I retired to the smoking room, to smoke and to read in a corner, and to watch von Human, who soon came across to drink beer, and sulk in another. A few travelers tempted the Red Sea in midsummer. The Ohan was very empty indeed. She had, however, but a limited supply of cabins on the promenade deck, and there was just an excuse for my sharing Raffles' room. I could not have done myself downstairs, but I must be up above. Raffles has urged that I should insist to that point, so we were together. I think without suspicion, and most certainly without the object that I could see. On the Sunday afternoon I was asleep in my berth, the lower one, when the curtains were shaken by Raffles, who was in his shirt-sleeves and his settee. Achilles, sulking in his tent as usual. What else is there to do? I asked him, as I stretched and yawned. I noted, however, the good humor in his tone, and did my best to catch it. I have found something else, Bunny. I dare say. You misunderstand me. The whippersnapper's making his century this afternoon, and we've had the other fish to fry. I swung my legs over the side of my berth and sat forward as he was sitting, all attention. The inner door, a grating, was shut and bolted, and curtained like the open porthole. We shall be in Genoa before sunset, continued Raffles, the place where deeds got to be done. So you still mean to do it? Did I ever say I didn't? You have said so little either way. Advisedly so, my dear bunny. Why spoil a pleasure trip by unnecessary talking shop? But now as the time has come, it must be done at Genoa, or not at all. On land? No, on board, tomorrow night. Tonight would do, but tomorrow is better, in case of mishap. If we were forced to use violence, we would get away with the earliest train, and nothing would be known till the ship was sailing and Von Human found dead or drugged. Not dead, I exclaimed. Oh, of course not, assented Raffles, or there would be no need for us to bolt. But if we should have to bolt, Tuesday morning is our time, when the ship has got sail, whatever happens. But I don't anticipate any violence. Violence is a confession of terrible incompetence. In all these years, how many blows have you known me to strike? Not one, I believe. But I have been quite ready to kill my man every time, if the worst came to the worst. I asked him how he proposed to enter Von Human's stateroom unobserved, and even though the curtained gloom of ours, his face lighted up. Climb into my butt, Bunny, and you shall see. I did so, but could see nothing. Raffles reached across and tapped the ventilator, a sort of trapdoor in which the ceiling was above the bed, some 18 inches long and half that in height, and opening upwards into the ventilation shaft. That, he said, is our door of fortune. Open it if you like. You won't see much, because it doesn't open very far, but loosening it a couple of screws will set it all that right. The shaft, as you may see, is more or less bottomless. You pass under it whenever you go into your bath, and the top is a skylight on the bridge. That's when this thing has to be done, while we're at Genoa, because they keep no watch on the bridge at port. The ventilator opposite of ours is Von Human's. It again only will be a couple of screws, and there's a beam to stand on while you work. But if anyone should look up from below, it's extremely unlikely that anyone will be astir below, so unlikely that we will afford to chance it. No, I can't have you up there to make sure. Its great point is that neither of us should be seen from the time we turn in. A couple of ship's boys do sentry go and on these decks, and they will be our witnesses. By Jove, it's the biggest mystery that has ever been made. If Von Human does resist? Resist? He won't get a chance. He drinks too much beer to sleep light, and nothing is so easy to chloroform as a heavy sleeper. You've even done it yourself on an occasion of which it's perhaps unfair to remind you. Von Human will be past sensation almost as soon as I get my hand through the ventilator. I shall crawl over his body, Bunny, my boy. And I. You'll hand me what I want and hold the fort in case of accidents, and generally lend me the moral support you've made me require. It's a luxury, Bunny, but I've found it uncommonly difficult to do it without your turned pie. I said that Von Human was certain to sleep with the bolted door, which he, of course, would leave unbolted, and spoke of other ways of laying a false scent while rifling through the cabin. Not that Raffles anticipated a tiresome search. The pearl would be on Von Human's person. In fact, Raffles knew exactly where and when he kept it. Naturally, I asked how he could come to such knowledge, and his answer led up to a momentary unpleasantness. It's a very old story, Bunny. I really forget in what book it comes. I'm only sure which testament. But Samson was the unlucky hero, and the one Delilah was a heroine. And it looked so knowing that I could not be the moment's doubt as to his meaning. So the fair Australian has been playing Delilah, said I, in a very harmless and innocent sort of way. She's got his mission out of him. Oh yes, I forced him to score all the points he could, and that was his great stroke, as I had hoped. He has even shown Amy the pearl. Amy, eh? And she promptly told you? Nothing of the kind. What makes you think so? I had the greatest trouble in getting it out of her. His tone should have been a significant warning to me. I had not the tact to make it as such. At last I knew the meaning of his furious flirtation, and stood waging my head and shaking my finger, blinded to his frowns by his own enlightenment. Wily dog, I said. Now I see through it all. How dense I've been. Sure you're not still? No, now I understand what has beaten me all week. I simply couldn't fathom what you saw in that little girl. I never dreamt it was part of the game. So you think it was that and nothing more? You deep old rascal, of course I do. You didn't know that she was the daughter of a wealthy squatter. There are wealthy women by the dozen who would marry you tomorrow. It doesn't occur to you that I might like to draw stumps, start clean, and live happily ever after, even in the bush? With Amy Warner, I certainly does not. A bunny, he cried so fiercely that I had braced myself for a blow, but no more followed. Do you think you would live happily? I made bold to ask him. God knows, he answered. And with that he left me, to marvel at his look and tone, and, more than ever, at his insufficiently exciting cause. Part 3. Of all of the mere feats of cracksmanship which I had seen Raffles perform, at once the most delicate and most difficult was that which he accomplished between 1 and 2 on Tuesday morning, aboard the North German steamer Ulhan, lying at anchor in Genoa harbor. Not a hitch occurred. Everything had been foreseen. Everything happened as it had been assured everything must. Nobody was about below, only the ship's boys on deck, and nobody on the bridge. It was 25 minutes past 1 when Raffles, without a stitch of clothing on his body, but with a glass vial corked with cotton wool between his teeth and a little screwdriver behind his ear, squirmed feet first through the ventilator over his own berth. It was his 19 minutes to when he returned, head first, the vial of cotton still between his teeth. The cotton wool rammed home to still the rattling, that which lay in a great beam within. He had taken screws out and put them in again. He had unfastened von Human's ventilator, and had left it fast as he had found it, fast as he had instantly proceeded to make his own. As for von Human, it had been enough to place the drenched wad first on his mustache, and then to hold it between his gaping lips. Thereafter the intruder had climbed both ways across the shins without eliciting a groan. And here was the prize, this pearl as large as a filbert, with a pale pink tinge like a lady's fingernail, this spoil of filibustering age, this gift from a European emperor to a South Sea chief. We gloated over it when all was sunk. We toasted it in whiskey and soda water, laid in over nights in view of the great moment. But the moment was greater, more triumphant than our most sanguine dreams. All we had to do was to secrete the gem, which Raffles was prized from getting its setting, replacing the latter, so that we could stand the strictest search and yet take it ashore with us to Naples. And this Raffles was doing when I turned in. I myself would have gone contently ashore and bolted for the spoil. You would not hear of it, but for a dozen good reasons, which will be obvious. Hey, Matsu. On the whole, I do not think that anything was discovered or suspected before we weighed anchor, but I cannot be sure. It is difficult to believe that a man could be chloroformed in his sleep and feel no telltale effects. Stiff, no suspicion of odor in the morning. Nevertheless, von Human reappeared as though nothing had happened to him, his German cap over his eyes and his mustache brushing in his peak. By 10 o'clock, we were quit of Genoa, and the last lean, blue-chinned official had left our decks. The last fruit seller had been beaten off with bucketfuls of water and left cursing us from his boat. The last passenger had come aboard at the last moment, a fussy graybeard who had kept his big ship waiting while he haggled with his boatman over half a lira. But at length we were off. The tug was shed, the lighthouse passed, and Raffles and I leaned together on the rail, watching our shadows on the pale green liquid veined marble that again washed the vessel's side. Von Human was having his innings once more. It was part of the design that he should remain in all day and propose in the inevitable hour. And though the lady looked bored and was never ever glancing in her direction, he seemed only too willing to avail himself of his opportunities. But Raffles was moody and ill at ease. He had not the air of a successful man. I could not opine the impending parting of Naples that sat heavily upon his spirits. He would neither talk to me, nor would he let me go. "Stop where you are, Bunny. I have things to tell you. Can you swim?" "A bit. 10 miles." I burst out laughing. "Not one. Why do you think that?" "We shall be within the 10 miles from the shore most of the day." "What on earth are you driving at, Raffles?" "Oh, nothing. Only I shall swim for it if the worst comes to worst. I suppose you can't swim under water at all?" I did not hear his answer. I scarcely heard it. Cold beads were bursting through my skin. "Why should the worst come to the worst?" I whispered. "We aren't found out, are we?" "No." "Why speak as though we were?" "We may be. An old enemy of ours is on board ship." "An old enemy?" "Mackenzie." "Never!" "The man with the beard who came aboard last." "Are you sure?" "Sure. I was almost surprised you didn't recognize him, too." I took my handkerchief to my face, now that I thought of it, and had been something familiar with the old man's gait, and, well, was something very youthful for his apparent age. His very beard seemed unconvincing now that I recalled it in the light of the horrible revelation. I looked up and down the deck, but the old man was nowhere to be seen. "It's the worst of it," said Raffles. "I saw him go into the captain's cabin 20 minutes ago." "But what have brought him?" I cried. "Can it be the Confederates? Is it something else he's after?" Raffles shook his head. "Hardly this time." "Then you think he's after you?" "I've been afraid of it for some weeks." "Yet there you stand?" "What am I to do? I don't want to swim for it if I must. I begin to wish I'd taken your advice, Bunny, and left the ship at Genoa. But I'm not the smallest doubt that Mac is watching both ship and station till the last moment. That's why he ran it so fast." He took a cigarette and handed me the case, but I shook my head impatiently. "I still don't understand," I said. "Why should he come after you? He hadn't come all this way about a jewel that was perfectly safe for all he knew. What's your own theory?" "Simply that he's been on my track for some time. Probably ever since my friend Crush had slipped clean through his fingers last November. There's been other indications. I am really not unprepared for this, but it can only be pure speculation. I defy him to bring anything home, and I defy him to stand the pearl. Theory, my dear Bunny. I know that he's got here as well as though I had been inside that Scotland skin, and I know what he'll do next. He found out I've gone abroad and looked for a motive. He found about Von Herman on his mission, and there was his motive cut and dried. Great chance to nab me in a new job together. But he won't do it, Bunny. Mark my words, he'll search the ship and search us all. When the loss is known, he'll search in vain. And there's the skipper beckoning the whippersnapper to his cabin. The fat will be on the fire in 5 minutes." Yet there was no conflagration, no fuss, no searching of the passengers, no whisper of what had happened in the air. Instead of a stir, there was a portentous peace. It was a little clear to me that Raffles was not a little disturbed at the falsification of all of his predictions. There was something sinister in the silence under such a loss, and the silence was sustained for hours, during which Mackenzie never reappeared. But he was aboard during the luncheon hour. He was in our cabin. I left my book in Raffles' berth, and taking it in after lunch, I touched the quilt. It was warm from the recent pressure of flesh and blood. On a recent, I sprang to the ventilator, and as I opened it, the ventilator opposite was closed with the snaps. I relayed Raffles. "All right, let him find the pearl." "Have you dumped it overboard?" "That's a question I shan't consent on." He turned on his heel, and at subsequent intervals I saw him making the most of his last afternoon with the inevitable Miss Werner. I remember that she looked both cool and smart in quite a simple fair and brown holland, which toned well with her complexion, and was cleverly relieved with touches of scarlet. I quite admired her that afternoon, for her eyes were really fine, and so were her teeth, yet I had never admired her more discreetly than in our own despite. for I passed them again and again in order to get a word with Raffles, tell him I knew there was danger in the wind, but he would not so much as catch my eye, so at last I gave it up, and I saw him next in the captain's cabin. They had summoned him first. He had gone in smiling, and smiling I found him when they summoned me. The stateroom was spacious, as befitted with a commander. Mackenzie sat on the settee, his beard in front of him on the polished table, but a revolver lay in front of the captain, and when I had entered, the chief officer who had summoned me shut the door and put his back to it. When Human completed the party, his fingers busy with his mustache, Raffles greeted me. "This is a great joke," he cried. "You remember that pearl that you've been so keen about, Bunny? The Emperor's pearl? The pearl money couldn't buy? It seems it was entrusted to our little friend here, and take out at Canoodle Dum. And the poor little chap's gone and lost it. Ergo, as we're Britishers, they think we've got it." "But I'll have you know," put Mackenzie, nodding his head, "you'll recognize that loyal and patriotic voice, Raffles. Mon, 'tis our old acquaintance Mackenzie of Scotland Yard, and Scotland itself." "That is enough," cried the captain. "We have you submit you to the search, or do I force you?" "Will you what?" asked Raffles. "But it will do you no harm to give us fair play first. You accuse us of breaking into Captain Von Human's stateroom during the small hours of the morning and extracting from it this confounded pearl. Well, I can prove that I was in my own room all night long, and I have no doubt my friend can prove the same." "Most certainly I can," I said indignantly. "The ship's boys can bear witness to that." Mackenzie laughed and shook his head at his reflection in the polished mahogany. "That was very clever," he said. "Not like it would have served you to not step aboard. But I've just had a look at the ventilators, and think I know you've worked it. Anyway, Captain, it makes no matter. I'll just be clapping the darbies on these two young sparks, and then—" "By what right?" roared Raffles in a ringing voice, and I never saw his face in such a blaze. "Search us if you like, search every scrap and stitch we possess, but you dare to lay a finger on us without a warrant." "I wouldn't dare," said Mackenzie gravely, as he fumbled in his breast pocket, and Raffles dived a hand into his own. "Hold his wrist!" shouted the Scotsman, and the huge Colt that had been with us many a night, but had never been fired in my hearing, clattered on the table and was ranked in by the captain. "All right," said Raffles savagely to the mate. "You can let it go now. I won't try again. Now, Mr. Mackenzie, let's see your warrant." "You not mishandle it?" "What good would that do me? Let me see it," said Raffles peremptorily, and the detective obeyed. Raffles raised his eyebrows as he perused the document. His mouth hardened and suddenly relaxed, and it was with a smile and a shrug he returned the paper. "Will that do for you?" inquired Mackenzie. "It may. I congratulate you, Mackenzie. It's a strong hand at any rate. 2 burglaries and Noah's necklace, Bunny," and he turned to me with a rueful smile. "All easy to prove," said the Scotsman, pocketing the warrant. "One of these for you," he added, nodding to me. "Not only is it such a long one." "To think," the captain said reproachfully, "that my ship should have been a den of thieves. It shall be a very disagreeable matter. I've been obliged to put you both in irons till we get to Naples." "Surely not," exclaimed Raffles. "Mackenzie, intercede with him. Don't give your countrymen away before all hands. Captain, we can't escape. Surely you couldn't hush up for the night. Look here, here's everything I have in my pockets. You too, but empty yours, Bunny. We shall strip us stock, and they suspect we've weapons up our sleeves. All I ask is that we're allowed to get on this without niggers on our wrists." "Weapons you may have," said the captain. "But what about the pearl that you are seeking?" "You shall have it," cried Raffles. "You shall have it this minute if you guarantee the public and dignity on board." "See that I'll do that," said Mackenzie, "as long as you behave yourselves. There now, where is it?" "On the table under your nose." My eyes fell with the rest, but no pearl was there, only the contents of our pockets, our watches, pocketbooks, pencils, penknives, cigarette cases, on the shining table along with the revolvers already mentioned. "You're humbugging us," said Mackenzie. "What's the use?" "I'm not doing nothing of the sort," laughed Raffles. "I'm testing you. Where's the arm?" "It's here, joke apart." "On the table, by all gods!" Mackenzie opened the cigarette cases and shook each particular cigarette. Thereupon Raffles prayed to be allowed to smoke one, and when his prayer was heard, observed that the pearl had been on the table much longer than the cigarettes. Mackenzie promptly caught up the Colt and opened the chamber, but the bolt. "Not there, not there," said Raffles. "But you're getting hot. Try the cartridges." Mackenzie emptied them into the palm and shook out each one of them with ear as out of subject. "Oh, give them to me!" And in an instant Raffles had found the right one, bitten out the bolt, and placed the Emperor's pearl with a flourish into the center of the table. "And after all that, perhaps you will show me such little consideration that is in your power, Captain. I'm a bit of a villain, as you see, and am already ready and willing to lie in irons all night if you deem the requisites of the safety of the ship. All I ask is that you do me one favor first." "That shall depend on what the favor is, man." "Captain, I've done worse thing aboard your ship than any will know. I've become engaged to be married and want to say goodbye." I suppose we were all equally amazed, but the only one to express his amazement was von Neumann, whose deep-chested German oath was almost his first contribution to the proceedings. He was not slow to follow it, however, with a vigorous protest against the proposed farewell. But he was overruled, and the masterful prisoner had his way. He is to have 5 minutes with the girl, while the Captain and Mackenzie stood within range, but not earshot, with the revolvers behind their backs. As we were moving from the cabin in a body, he stopped and gripped my hand. "So I've let you in at last, Bunny. At last, and after all. If you knew how sorry I am. But you won't get much. I don't see why you should forgive me anything at all. Can you forgive me? This may be for years, and it may be forever, you know. You were a good pal always when it came to the scratch. Some day or other you mustn't be so sorry, and remember that you were a good pal to the last." There was a meaning in his eye that I understood, and my teeth were set, my nerves strung ready, as I wrung that strong and cunning hand for the last time in my life. How that last scene stays with me, and will stay until my death. How I see every detail, every shadow on the sunlit deck. We were among the islands that dot the course of Genoa and Naples. That the Elba was falling on her back in the starboard quarter, that purple patched in the hot sun setting over. The captain's cabin opened to the starboard, and the starboard promenade deck, sheeted with sunshine and scored with shadow, was deserted but for a group of which I saw I was one, for the pale, slim, brown figure further aft with Raffles. Engaged! I could not believe it, cannot to this day. Yet there they stood together, and we did not hear a word. There they stood against the sunsets, in the long dazzling highway of sunlit sea that sparkled from Elba to the Azores plates, and their shadows reached almost to our feet. Suddenly, an instant, and the thing was done. A thing I have never known whether to admire or to detest. He caught her, he kissed her before us all, then flung her from him so that she almost fell. It was that action which foretold the next. The mate sprang after him, and I sprang after the mate. Raffles was on the rail, but only just. "Hold him, Bunny!" he cried. "Hold him tight!" And, as I obeyed the last behest with all my might, without the thought of what I was doing, save that he bade me to do it, I saw his hands shoot up and his head bob down, and with lithe, spare body cut the sunset as cleanly and precisely as though he had plunged at leisure from a diver's board. Of what followed on deck I can tell you nothing, for I was not there, nor can my final punishment, my long imprisonments, my everlasting disgrace, concern or profit you, beyond the interest of advantage to be gleaned from the knowledge that I had my deserts. But one thing I must set down. Believe it who will, one thing only, and I am done. It was into a second-class cabin on the starboard side that I was promptly thrust in irons, and the door locked upon me as though I were another Raffles. Meanwhile, a boat was lowered and the sea scoured with no purpose, as it was doubtless on record everywhere. But either the setting sun, flashing over the waves, must have blinded all eyes, or else mine were victims of a strange illusion. For the boat was back, the screw throbbing, and the prisoner peering through the porthole across the sunlit waters that he believed he had closed forever over his comrade's head. Suddenly the sun sank behind the island of Elba. The line of dancing sunlight was instantaneously quenched and swallowed in the trackless waste, and in the middle distance, already miles astern, either my sight deceived me, or a black speck bobbed amid the gray. The bugle had blown for dinner. It may have been that same that ceased to strain my eye. And now I lost what I had found. Now it rose, now it sank, and now I gave it up utterly. Yet anon it would rise again, and merely mote dancing in the dim gray distance, drifting towards the purple island, beneath a fading western sky, streaked with dead gold and cerise. And night fell before I knew whether it was a human head or not. Well then. Good ending to that one. Did he really escape? Did he survive? We don't know. And now we should find someone to see if there's anyone to raid. Does anyone have any suggestions? Because, I'm always open for suggestions. And again, to my knowledge, there will be fairy tales tomorrow. Because my game was moved to Saturday. Yeah, any suggestion for raids? Yes. Is she on already? Check. Do I have a Sophia window? Oh, well. Sophia just raided Felcor. Yeah, I just opened my window in time to see the raid. Well, I guess I could refill quick too. Oh, I know Harp Griffin is on. I know Neff is on. What's Harp reading? Harp is reading... Oh! Harp is reading Sherlock Holmes. Seems like a good person to raid. So we can stick with mysteries. She's actually reading the Beryl Cornet. So yeah, let's go right here. Again, it definitely is Sherlock Holmes Day. So let's go see here. I should be doing fairy tales tomorrow, so let's go right here.
In a quiet town where the shadows play, there's a little bookshop tucked away. During the day he wears a human face.